Alright, so today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an email generator that automatically generates random emails and passwords. As you can see, it's not very long. What this will do is it'll just grab some random names, some random domains. It'll put it together in different strings of numbers sometimes, and sometimes different first and last names. So I'll show you when we get to that. As you can see here, I'm going online and just grabbing a bunch of names off the internet and saving it to my notepad file. This video is heavily influenced off of another video that I'm going to put the link in the description, where someone creates something a little more simple than this to spam a scammer with random emails and passwords. But anyways, to put these lists into a JSON format, because I don't know any regex or however you say it, the PowerShell, I actually ended up just writing a program that would take any list I gave it and convert it to a dictionary in JSON format, and then use it from there. So this is an example of how that works. This is a JSON formatter, so you put in your file path that you'd like to use. And one thing that's important to note with this is that it only works with forward slashes for the JSON formatter. The other one is compatible both ways. So here I'm just going to put in the example I just saved, that huge list, and then it'll ask you for an object. Now, what we don't actually need to do is keep that object. We don't need it to be a dictionary, we just need the format, so we can erase the anything, and as you can see here, it's in JSON format, so that way we can access it later. So I'm actually going to delete this so that way I can show you how I'm going to run this. And I already have some lists here, so I'm gonna that I copied in, and this is showing you the generator. So you have to put in first names, surnames, passwords, and random words for this to work. And as you can see, it generated 10,000 usernames and 1,000 passwords in 620 milliseconds. We got Dkari, Retake Song 3, Michael Bond. So as you can see, some of these look pretty real, and it just randomly generates them. So without further ado, let's get into it. As you can see here, some of the passwords actually look kind of random too, on top of the 1,000 random passwords that we imported. So by starting this, I'm going to start with JSON formatter.py, and I'm going to import JSON because obviously that's what we're writing to. And we're going to get some input here, which is going to be the file name and the object name. And we are going to split the string of the first input by the forward slashes, and what that's going to do is give us our file name, because we're grabbing the last block there by splitting it up. And then we're going to take that file or that directory, and we're going to open it up and read it and store it as a variable called cont words actually. And as you can see here, I put a little like dot replace \r and replace \n, and that actually just formats it. It's going to split it and put spaces in there. And so here I'm saying for each item in the words, we're going to format it in this way, and this is just the way that it's going to be formatted, where we add the 4 spaces and the quote and then the word and then another quote and a comma, and then for the last one it's not going to add a comma, and then we're going to join those back together and store it as a dictionary. And as you can see here, right now it's stored as a string, but in the next line I'm going to execute it. And actually here I made a mistake while writing it, and you'll see later that I come back and fixed it. And then we have our output file, which is going to be creating a file and then dumping it in. And as you can see here, I have my error, and I go back and fix it. And don't worry that dict1 is red right now. It's not defined, but it will be once it executes the dictionary. And then, like I said earlier, we can actually just erase the extras on the beginning and the end, and so we just need those square brackets. So we're going to create a file called generator.py, and what we need is math, random, JSON, string, and time. And then we're going to get some inputs here. So we need the first name, the last name, a list of passwords, and the random words. And here I also made and then here we're going to create a variable called characters, which is going to be random letters, numbers, and special characters, and another one that's just random numbers. And here I made a mistake where I assign these all to our path for the name. What you really need to do is change that to G, H, I, and J on the open. I noticed that while I was editing this video. And then we are going to get the start time, which is going to start right before we get our calculations. So I'm going to assign a new array of all of the words inside of these that we're importing, as well as all the domains. Because there's only a few, I didn't bother with making a JSON file for large formats. And so now what we're going to do is for each item in the list, we're just going to append it to this new array, and we're going to change that for each of these paths that we gave it. All right, now we're going to start our function for actually generating the email and passwords. I know this isn't the most efficient way of doing it, but I created an a = 0 and then a while loop, and then each time it's going to increase by 1. And then this way it's easy to format. If it's less than 1,000, it'll continue, and once it hits 1,000, it will stop. So this right here is one of 3 options that we're going to have while creating the password. So as you'll see here, there are 3 different ways that we're going to generate a password, and it randomly just picks one of them. And this here is going to pick a random choice out of the index of names and the index of passwords. And that'll make sense here in a second. And what that does, that just floors to a random number between 1 and 1,000. And then for our numbers, we don't want each string with numbers to be the exact same length, because that'll be obvious. Like we don't want each string to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5 characters long. So it picks a random length of those characters. And then this is just establishing what the random string is going to be in each case. So each time this loops through, it's going to test if it's less than 1. If it's less than 1, we're going to do the first option, which is going to take a first name at a random index and a last name at a random index and a random string. If that's not true, we're going to test if it's less than 2, because that would mean that it's between 1 and 2. And then this time our password is going to be equal to a random password that we already stored in our passwords list and a random string. So the list could be something like Ferrari and then a random string Ferrari 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if it's between 2 and 3, it's just going to be a random string. And then here you can see that we actually append that to our passwords array. And then each time that we go through that while loop, A is increasing by 1, and we just print passwords here. And then we're going to start on our emails, which actually has 8 different options that you can choose between. And we're going to make 10,000 of them because we don't already have a list of emails. And here I'm just checking to make sure my indentation's correct, which I don't think it ends up being later, actually. So yeah, this right here is picking a random 1 out of 8 options, and then this is going to do the same where it's going to pick a random index 3 different times for each of 3 different variables that we can possibly have. And right here I also made another error. Create 3 should only be 8 because there's only 8 different domain names. That's what we use for our domains. Same thing with the range value and the random string, except for this one we use ucars instead of cars because I feel like random people don't just have like % signs in their emails. So we test if generate is less than equal to 1. And then our username is going to be a first name, a last name, and a domain. Easy enough. johndoe@gmail.com. That's what that would equate to. If it's between 1 and 2, our username is going to be a first name at a random index, a last name at a random index, and a random string. So johndoe1234@gmail.com, and then we get a random domain there as well. If it's between 2 and 3, our username is going to be a last name and then a random string and a domain. So doe123@yahoo.com. Between 3 and 4, username is going to be equal to a first name, and it's just going to be the first letter. That's what the 0 is representing. So jdoe1234@aol.com. If it's between 4 and 5, our username is going to be equal to a random word at a random index, and then another random word at a random index with a string. So red car 567 at comcast.net. And if it's between 5 and 6, username is equal to a first name and then a random word and then a random string. So Joe Car 567 at outlook.com. And if it's between 6 and 7, username is going to be equal to a first name. And this is where I actually think that I created a repetitive, option. I was reading off a script as I was writing this because I obviously already created it in the past. So there was a first name, a last name, and a random word instead of just being a first name, a random word, and domain. And then our final one, we're going to create a username. If it's between 7 or 8 or equal to 8, it's going to create a username. It's going to be a random word. It's going to be another random word and a domain. And this is where I'm going to append, and I'm actually going to put the lower method on it, so that way if hypothetically this were going to be for the same use that I have in the video in the description by Engineering Man, obviously you wouldn't want the emails to come in uppercase. And then this will get the end time, which is going to get the time it took for all of these calculations, 1,000 passwords and 10,000 usernames, and it multiplies it by 1,000 to get milliseconds. And then elapsed time is end time minus start time, obviously, and it prints usernames. And this is just giving a little string that's saying it generated B, which is the quantity of usernames, and A, the quantity of passwords, in, and then elapsed time. This is where I realize that my indentation is incorrect, and so I go back and fix all of this real quick. Sorry about that. And then I end up putting elapsed time here. And then we need to call our generate method. While we talk about that, I want to go back and address some errors that I had. Because I used I for one of the inputs, we need to change the I in the for loops in our random strings. And also on one of these, I put domains create to, which is going to get an index between 1 and 1,000, and we need one between 1 and 8. And then after a while, I found another error, which was exactly the same, where create 3 was an index between 1 and 1,000, and it needs to be between 1 and 8. So as we run this, we can see our outcome. So we need to get our first name list, and we need to get that in a path. And if you get that off of online, you can just format that into the JSON, or if you know regex, that'll be fine too. And do the same for a last name, do the same for a password list. And I will put links in the description on where you can find some of these lists. All right, and as you can see, there's a little error with printing out the passwords because I didn't change the input to take in different paths, but it does just change the paths to be H, I, and J, and not just G all the way through. As you look here, you can see all these emails. R. Hank, Kyrie Matthews. And then when you want to get random words, you can go to this website, which I'll also put in the description. Make sure that it's at 100, and just copy and paste this into a notepad. As you can see here, I have a bit of trouble actually getting the top word, malt, to copy. It's a little bit hard to copy because it's got all the hearts and stuff in the syntax. But you just copy that and put it into a notepad, and you got your words. For last names or any other list, you might get a table where you can't just get one column. Wikipedia does this a lot, and same with this one where it has 1,000 last names. So what you can do is get the URL and go over and create a new spreadsheet. And once that loads in, you can put in this formula, import HTML, and you put the URL in quotation marks, and then comma, and then in quotation marks you put table, and then comma, and then you put the index of the table. So if there are 5 tables and you want the 4th one, you're going to put 3. And yeah, so now you can just grab the last names out of the column that you want, 1,000 of them. And as you can see here, they're all in uppercase, but that won't matter because we use a lowercase method later. And then I just wanted to point out that I have this on my GitHub, which will always be in the description. So you can just download this if you want to. Anyways, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.